Well, once Bo Nix moves on from Oregon, we don't know what the quarterback situation will be like. But there is one thing we do know. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, wherever you listen to or watch this show. We're still talking quarterbacks today because the 2024 question is interesting. It's fascinating, honestly, because it's really up in the air. You don't know. I think the easy response is, well, they'll probably just look to add a transfer. Yeah, they could. They could. It's a very real possibility. It's always going to be a possibility for every position group, especially quarterback. Especially quarterback. Like, look at Sam Hartman going to Notre Dame. He was at Wake Forest. He was having success there, but just felt, I feel like I can go to a more successful place where I can do better. That's just the world that we live in now. But here's the one thing that we do know for certain, right? I don't know who's lining up in 2024 at quarterback, but what I know is that the two guys on the roster will have a chance to earn that job. And this thought stems from a question from Robin Bartram, who I think hopped in the YouTube comments. You can go there. You can go on Twitter at smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. The mailbag is filling back up. And I love it because guess what? We've got quite a while till we have got Oregon football back. So we're going to talk about everything and be as informed and engaged as we possibly can. That is my mission. That is my job. That is my goal here on the show. But so Robin asks that question. Do you think the freshman quarterbacks will have a good shot at being the future for the Ducks? I assume he means Ty Thompson, who is not a freshman anymore, and Austin Novosad. I think in terms of their game, we don't know. I mean, we certainly don't know with Novosad. The early indicators have not been good for Ty Thompson, but players can change. Players can improve. Maybe it just needs a different system. Maybe it just needs more time. I don't know. But what I also know is that Cade Klubnik looks pretty good at Clemson. Didn't have a great offensive line in the Orange Bowl. He didn't start right away. Herbert didn't start right away. Mariota sat for an entire year. Like think about that. The best player in Oregon history sat for an entire year, didn't take a single snap. And I'm not here proclaiming with certainty, because there is no certainty really, that Ty Thompson will be Oregon's starter next year. But a lot of you want to give up on him already. And I think that is misguided. The best player in team history sat for an entire year behind a successful veteran quarterback. If he needed 1 year, why couldn't Ty Thompson need 2 or maybe 3 to be able to be not the best in Oregon history, but a capable starting quarterback? I just don't think you should remove that possibility from your mind. Some of you were talking to me on Twitter or YouTube saying, oh man, no, he's not it. We got to move on. He's this, that, and the other thing. It's like, we don't fully know, first of all. I think we can have an inclination that 2 different staffs have said he's not ready to be a starter right now, but maybe he needs 3 years. Maybe. Guys can improve, even if they're not playing a lot, though eventually you do need to see some game reps there. But what we'll know for certain going into next year is both those guys are going to have a chance. They will have a chance to be the starting quarterback, earn that trust from Will Stein, the OC and quarterbacks coach, Dan Lanning, and the rest of the offensive staff, and the players too. Can't overlook that part of it. And if the coaching staff evaluates those two, Novosad and Ty Thompson, both of whom have the talent to be starting quarterbacks, but there's just so much more that goes into being a good college football player, especially at that position, but at every position, right? Dante Manning is the most physically gifted quarterback and the highest rated recruit, or cornerback. I think I said that, but anyway, I want to make that clear. He is the most physically gifted cornerback Oregon's ever had. He has better overall athleticism than Christian Gonzalez. But Christian Gonzalez is a much better football player right now than Dante Manning. There are a lot of things that go into it, and it's especially true at the quarterback position, which is why I'm willing to be patient, and I'm not going to just punt on Ty Thompson. Now, I'm not going to consider him the only option going forward, or Novosad is the only option going forward, because this is essentially a year-to-year business. You got to do what is best for that season. Have an eye on the future, but also understand this is what we need right now. Both those guys this year in spring camp, I think Novosad is an early enrollee, but obviously we know Thompson is there. And they'll be at practice all year long. And then Bo Nix will depart. And if the coaching staff feels confident in either of them, and they've shown enough to be the starting quarterback, then they will have the chance to do so, because there is no set plan for 2024 beyond them. So do they have the talent to do that? Yes. Are they going to have the opportunity? Also, yes. Those are the things we know. But whether or not they're going to be able to maximize their talent, that's a question no one can answer right now, because you're talking about 2024. But it is an interesting thought. On a similar note, this question came in from Mike B62. Isn't that a bomber, like a World War II bomber? That might have been 52. That was the first thing that I thought of here. Hey, Spencer, love your show. Appreciate you, man. What is your take on quarterback development, or lack thereof, as we head into 2023 and look forward to 2024? Were you concerned that the moment seemed too big when Ty was brought into the UW game with the outcome on the line? What needs to happen for Ty to gain the confidence needed to lead his team if and when called upon? Thank you for all you do to keep us Duck fans informed. Appreciate all of you supporting the show, doing everything I can here, getting to the off season. And I got to get to something on that note in a little bit. But the development question is going to be an even more intriguing one as you move into the portal era. Like, there is a possibility, a very real possibility, that when you evaluate a team's performance at the quarterback position over, let's say, a 10-year period. Well, coaches move around a lot. Let's say 5 to 7, somewhere in there, right? 5, 7, 10, whatever. You could look at it and say they brought in a transfer, depending on the program. You could look at a team and say they brought in a transfer to start every year but one. And high school kids developing into starting quarterbacks could become the anomaly. Now, I don't think that's going to happen completely. But I do think you will have schools, and right now, we can't know what Oregon's going to be on that front with Dan Lanning at the helm. It's too early. It's only been 1 year. I mean, he had to come in, find someone who he could trust, a quarterback who he'd worked with before, right, with his offensive coordinator, and Bo Nix made a lot of sense, and it went really, really well. But I do think you will see teams who will just say, do we rely on the portal every year and have a high school recruit as a backup option, but not be all in on him unless we can get one of these highly coveted quarterback recruits? I think you could see that because, like I talked about, it's such a year-to-year ordeal now. College sports have always been that, basketball more than football. But I think with the portal now, college football is becoming a little bit like college basketball, except the high school recruits you do bring in have to stay for a couple of years. A lot more thoughts coming on that, and plenty of thoughts on Built Bars and how fantastic they are. Because if you want a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try Built Bar. It's that simple. If you want to eat healthier, then you got to try Built, because they're delicious. They got a bunch of great flavors. They fill you up. 4 grams of sugar, 130 calories, 17 grams of protein. They got everything you need. Walmart, Sam's Club, Built.com. You can get your latest order. Churro, peanut butter brownie. My mint brownie is so fantastic and really excellent. Coconut, almond. They've really got it all. So go get your latest order of Built Bars today for tasty, healthy treats. I am not here arguing that every school is going to be this way and just completely punt on quarterback development. But with the availability of not just quarterbacks, but quality quarterbacks we've seen in the portal consistently, I think you could see some programs opts not to go the high school developmental route as often. I don't think it'll go away entirely. And I'm curious, this was kind of the first year where the portal really exploded, where it really took off and all these players were in, and we're trying to figure out. I mean, they were doing that thing on College Game Day where it was like, where did he go? Where did he come from? Right? The quarterback portal tracker, whatever they called it. I think it's going to be interesting. And I don't think we have an inclination right now of what Oregon's going to be. Yeah, they brought in Bo Nix in Dan Lanning's first year. But what's to say they didn't recruit Austin Novosad because they believe he could be the starting quarterback? I don't think that they would bring in someone of Novosad's caliber unless they believed he could be the starter one day. But that balance, I think, is now getting a lot tougher for coaching staffs because on the one hand, you can't fully develop a guy if he doesn't play. He can learn a lot. He can make himself ready. But can he become one day the best version of himself if he doesn't play? No, probably not. You can prepare yourself for that starting quarterback job, but which quarterback has a great first year and then ends up getting worse? I can't think of an Oregon quarterback who's done that, right? And it also depends on where you're at with the program, how much competitive you are on a year-to-year basis. Because think about it. 2016, Oregon brought in a transfer that from the outset, if I'd been hosting a show at that time, would have said, yeah, I think you bring in Dakota Prukop. He can be a mentor for Justin Herbert. But that timeline got moved up because Prukop was not winning enough games. He wasn't terrible, but he wasn't that good either. He wasn't winning games, so they said, okay, season's kind of done. Let's put the young guy in there. But if Oregon's winning at a high level, that balance becomes really, really tricky. Because like I said, Ty Thompson hasn't seen the field meaningfully, and he can never develop into a good quarterback if he never plays. Like at some point, he would have to play. He's got to show it more, I think, in practice and things like the spring game first. But that is now, I think, one of, as I say it out loud, I think it's one of the bigger challenges coaches are dealing with now, is how do you build for the future when it's such an all-in endeavor, especially for a program like Oregon that's able to win at a high level right here, right now. Back-to-back 10-win seasons, not good enough. Adding more talent. The roster across the board, if you just evaluate the total amount of talent there and the quality of players, probably has more talent going into this year than last year, save for a couple of key spots, that being Christian Gonzalez, Noah Sewell, and Alex Forsythe at center. But everywhere else, I think top to bottom, you've got more talent. So then how do you think about the future? That's a question Dan Lanning and his staff have to answer. And if you're going to develop a quarterback, some guys need 1 year, some guys need 2, some guys might need 3. You never know. You really never know. But at some point, either Ty or Austin will have to show the coaching staff in practice, in the spring game, consistently that they're prepared to go out there and take game snaps. I mean, think about, I can't see teams completely ignoring the development of high school quarterbacks. But is it harder to do than add a transfer who you know is ready to play and has been winning games and competing and playing well at a Power 5 level already for the last couple of years at another school? Yeah. I think that argument's pretty clear. But do you always have the right quarterback for your system? No. Whereas at the high school level, you're recruiting someone who can fit the system because that's why you brought him in, is you feel like this is what we're doing offensively. He can fit into that. You can't guarantee that the transfers are going to be able to suit that all the time, year in and year out, which is why I don't think the high school development thing will just completely go away. And quarterback is the most developmental position on the field. Offensive line is probably close. Offensive and defensive line, guys need to bulk up, learn moves a little bit. I think those are the biggest developmental positions from the high school ranks. And I'm excited to see which of Oregon's defensive linemen will, kind of move into that category going forward of like who really develops into a good player. Brandon Dorless, by the way, Oregon's best defensive lineman right now, certainly was this past year. pretty middling 3-star recruit. He was a developmental piece. He was a player. He was a contributor. Then he was a little bit better. Then he took a step forward. Then he took another step forward. And now if he takes even another one, he could be early to mid-round NFL draft pick for sure. The last part of your question there, Mike B62. What needs to happen for Ty to gain the confidence needed to lead this team if and when called upon? I think the biggest thing, if it's not going to come in game action, I mean, if he were forced into action and were able to deliver a game-winning moment, that would help. But I think it has to come from the coaching staff and the players. Because there's some sort of disconnect between Ty Thompson learning the offense the way he needs to be a starting caliber quarterback and the talent that he has, that we know that he has arm-wise, right? Like he's got all the physical tools, but that's the thing that's missing. Maybe it's more time in practice. Maybe it's the right coach. Maybe it's the players believe in him. Maybe I think it's something on that of that nature. I think it's the coaching element. The coach has got to believe in him, put their trust in him. I don't think it has to be a game moment for that light to really come on. So we'll kind of see what happens going forward there. Before I get to Trayshawn Holden, who's back, I'm sorry, I forgot to write it down in my notes, but an idea that I want your guys' help with. You know how to get in touch with me by now. Smalls_55 or @LockedOnDucks. You can also hop in the YouTube comments. There was an idea suggested that I come up with a countdown to the next Oregon football game, because we've still got a ways to go, and we're going to be talking about it basically from now until September 2nd. I mean, I cannot wait. But what sort of ideas can we come up with? And I'm not that creative of a person with these sorts of things. Obviously, with opinions in sports talk, I'd like to think I'm at least somewhat respectable on that front. But with something like this, I'm not. So if you've got an idea for how we can kind of count down the days and just chip away at it one day at a time and whatnot, as we do every day on the show, let me know. I'd be curious to see what you guys come up with. I kind of drew a blank on that front, other than like stack of Post-its or cards, and I don't know. See why I'm going to you guys for all of this. That's probably the best course of action here. Trayshawn Holden is back with the team. Good for Oregon's depth chart. Good meaning he's not on a path that you would never want to see a young man be on. And look, I think the prospect of Jurion Dickey and Kyler Casper, I think both are pretty tremendous. Though I will say, Trayshawn Holden probably starts as your Z receiver and Franklin starts as your X, but who backs up Troy Franklin? I think that answer might be Kyler Casper. Could be Jurion Dickey. I still hope that we see both on the field this year, because I think they have great potential, and I think Oregon, from a depth chart perspective, needs both. But am I glad Trayshawn Holden's there? Yes. Because still at this point in time, Casper in a full-time role and Jurion Dickey at all, and Dickey's not going to arrive till the fall, by the way. He's not an early enrollee. He's finishing high school down in SoCal first, and then he's going to enroll in Oregon at the fall, so he'll be there for fall camp, but then it's not a lot of time. But he's so ready-made for the college game. It'll just be a matter of whether or not he can pick up the playbook that quickly. But at the very least, that first game against Portland State, we should see both those guys on the field in a significant way and get a glimpse into the future. It's just such a fascinating push and pull. The here and now, the future. Just always in college sports. That's the way it works, but that's why we love it. That is 100% why we love it. So I'm glad Holden's back for a number of reasons. I didn't feel the need to talk about it consistently because my take was, look, I'll let Dan Lanning make the decision. I think he will be able to make the right call. Seems like he made the right call here, which is a good sign for a really, really young coach. I understand acting quickly. I understand new information comes out and they go in a different direction. I think that's okay. Holden's here. Good news for the Ducks roster. Okay, let's wrap up with some basketball talk. Baseball had a rough weekend. Oh boy. Got swept by UC Santa Barbara. Outscored 20-3 in those games that were played in Eugene. Not ideal, but long season, a lot of promise there. We'll continue to follow that and such. But basketball is now in the thick of things. So I'll start with the men, and we'll close with the women here. They beat Oregon State. I mean, it wasn't the way you would have liked to have beaten Oregon State, but if you weren't going to blow them out, beating them at the buzzer just to break their hearts a little bit, maybe that is the best way to beat Oregon State. Shout out Rivaldo Soares. Just absolute ice in his veins. Hit the jumper with 0.6 of a second remaining. Tough fall away, 18-footer on the near wing, and just absolutely buried it. Big time shot. Was ready when the moment came to him, and I'm glad Oregon got that win. Beats the alternative. Definitely beats the alternative. So at least there's that. And they swept Oregon State this year. So another down year for Dana Altman's team, yes. But at least they swept Oregon State. So it could be worse. It could be worse. 2 games left in the regular season. The Bay Area schools against Cal and Stanford. Please win both of those games. I can't take losing to those teams again. They lost to Stanford once. They beat Cal the first time. Cal is historically bad. And Stanford is not very good, but has been playing a lot better, as Oregon learned over the last month and a half of the season or so. They're no longer a part of the next 4 out or the first 4 out or last 4 in or anything like that, according to Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology. So kind of feels, I will say there's maybe a 10% chance they could get an at-large if they got all the way to the conference tournament title game and they beat a couple good teams along the way. Maybe just because the resumes have been fluctuating around so much, that could be an option, but it seems like it's Pac-12 tournament or bust. But which, by the way, it didn't work out last year, but in 18-19 season, Peyton Pritchard, Kenny Wooten, that team had to win the tournament to get in. And they did. And they went all the way to the Sweet 16, lost to the eventual national champions in Virginia as a 12 seed. So I'm just saying it's not impossible. Do I have as much confidence in this team as that team? No. That team had Peyton Pritchard. This team does not. That team had some other good shooters. This team is very inconsistent shooting the basketball. But Jermaine Couisnard's a good player. I really like Couisnard. I am a Jermaine Couisnard fan. I'm also a fan of the Oregon women, Kelly Graves' team, ending the regular season with 2 wins. They beat number 14 Arizona at home, and then they trounced Arizona State. Now, ASU is not very good, but Oregon had been very good. They'd lost 7 in a row. And this is huge for the Ducks because they no longer feel like they have to win the Pac-12 tournament, but they need to make a run for sure. But they are more likely to get an at-large because of that Arizona win and then not stumbling against Arizona State, which is something I'd love to see the men do consistently over the last couple of years. But anyway, that gives them a better chance. I believe the women's bracketology's got them first 4 out. I think they're actually the first team out right now. That's not that far off. You go into that tournament, win a couple games, it's probably going to come against some quality opponents because Pac-12 women's basketball is stacked. Zona's good. Utah's awesome. Stanford, of course, rocks. UCLA's good. Just go down the list. Colorado, you got a lot of really good tournament caliber teams there. So I think they just need a couple solid wins of the Pac-12 tournament, and they could be in. Starts this week. They play the Huskies on Wednesday. Would definitely like to see them win that game. Appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.